The Lord of the Rings happened in the Third Age of Middle-earth. We know a little bit about the Fourth Age, but the Seventh Age? Yes, Tolkien talked about that too. Hi everyone, this is Robert. Welcome to In Deep Geek. On this channel we dive deep into Tolkien's Legendarium, as well as other classic fantasy worlds like A Song of Ice and Fire and The Witcher. If you want to know more, there's a subscribe button in the bottom right of your screen. Okay, let's start with the ages of Middle-earth that we know about. The First Age of Middle-earth is familiar to many Tolkien readers, as that's where much of the action of the Silmarillion takes place, and ends with the War of Roth and the sinking of much of Western Middle-earth. The Second Age covers the rise of Sauron, the forging of the Rings of Power, the rise and fall of Númenor. That ended with Sauron's downfall and the loss of the One Ring. It's what we saw in the introductory flashback to the Lord of the Rings films. The Third Age is the one we're most familiar with. It runs for just over 3,000 years, and at the end of it we get our stories from The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. The Fourth Age is what happens after that, and we get some details about the early years. Tolkien tells us about what happens to the heroes of The Lord of the Rings, the Hobbits, Legolas and Gimli, Aragorn and Arwen, Faramir and Éowyn, and so on, and the headlines of Aragorn's long reign over the reunited kingdom. Some magical people and things clearly survived on to the Fourth Age. Tom Bombadil remained in the Old Forest. Radagast was somewhere. 2 of the 7 Palantiri Seeing Stones survived. And though the Rings of Power lost their virtues with the destruction of the One Ring, nevertheless there were many more lesser magical rings, as well as magical swords and the like lying around or in use. But by and large, the magical and mythological elements of the world slowly disappeared. The elves all sailed west or diminished and faded. The dwarves reclaimed Khazad-dûm, then got back to mining and ignoring the outside world. Ents grew tired and indistinguishable from the trees they shepherded. Orcs were destroyed and the dragons dwindled. The dominion of man took over Middle-earth. And I suppose most of us assumed that that's where the story ends. The Fourth Age just dragged on for a while and we don't know what happened next. But that's not what Tolkien wanted, because Tolkien saw Middle-earth as our Earth. He was very clear that it wasn't just a matter of being in a different moment in time, but also a different moment in imagination, but that isn't to say that they are different places. Middle-earth is our Earth. Indeed, if you read deeper into Tolkien's Legendarium, and even in his letters back to fans, you can see that he kept up the writing conceit that he was, in-world, someone who has come into the possession of some ancient manuscripts and was translating and presenting those stories for us. At an even more grounded level, in the prologue to The Lord of the Rings, he describes hobbits as not just fictional creations or people from a long-lost age, but still here now, in our age. Hobbits are an unobtrusive but very ancient people, more numerous formerly than they are today, for they love peace and quiet and good-tilled earth. A well-ordered and well-farmed countryside was their favourite haunt. They do not and did not understand or like machines more complicated than forge bellows, a watermill or a hand-loom, though they were skillful with tools. Even in ancient days they were, as a rule, shy of the big folk, as they call us, and now they avoid us with dismay and are becoming hard to find. So Middle-earth is our Earth, and hobbits are still among us, though they hide from us so we can't see them. But what about those ages? How do we get from the Fourth Age to where we are today? And what's this about a Seventh Age? Well, let's start with a 1958 letter he wrote to Rona Beer, a fellow writer and scholar. He said, "I imagine the gap between the fall of Barad-dûr and our days to be about 6,000 years. That is, we are now at the end of the Fifth Age, if the ages were about the same length as the Second and Third, but they have, I think, quickened, and I imagine that we are now actually at the end of the Sixth Age, or in the Seventh." Tolkien evidently began thinking more deeply on the subject after that, and 2 years later modified his view, writing that we were then living in the year 1960 of the Seventh Age. So the Seventh Age is our age, and intriguingly matches up with the Western calendar. Year 0, or the changeover from the Sixth Age to the Seventh Age, happened with the birth of Christ. This, of course, makes sense. Tolkien was a very strong Catholic Christian. Of course, his understanding of the world now, even through the lens of his sub-created world, was a Catholic Christian one. As was, it would seem, the very concept of enumerated ages of the world. In The Nature of Middle-earth, an excellent bit of Tolkien scholarship, by the way, and well worth a read, editor Carl F. Hostetter explains that while many are familiar with the concept of named ages of the world as found in classical mythology, e.g. the Golden Age, the Silver Age, etc., it is far less known that the Catholic Church has long espoused a system of numbered ages of the world, extending through at least a sixth age. Throughout Tolkien's life, the proclamation of the birth of Christ, just before the start of the Christmas Vigil Mass, flatly stated that Christ was born in the sixth age of the world. This is something Tolkien will have been very aware of. These 6 ages were first propounded by Augustine, with the Venerable Bede later positing a 7th age concurrent with the 6th. Per Augustine's original formulation, the epochal events ending each of the first 4 ages were the Deluge, Noah's flood, the calling of Abraham, the crowning of King David, and the Jewish people's captivity in Babylon, respectively. Clearly, these moments are irreconcilable with Tolkien's first 4 ages, but perhaps what we see here are some hints as to what might have been events that marked the dividing lines between the end of the 4th and the start of the 5th, or the end of the 5th and the start of the 6th in Tolkien's world. Tolkien doesn't tell us. In fact, we don't have anything to go on, really, for the 5th and 6th ages. We could speculate that if we're looking for an event that can bridge between the mythological events of the first 4 ages and the real-life events of more recent ages, perhaps the Flood is a good guess, a story told by many cultures and with many similarities, and clearly calamitous on whatever scale it actually took place on, and the kind of thing that could wash away the remains of the 4th age, but that would just be speculation. What Tolkien does talk about, to a surprising degree in his wider writings about Middle-earth, is the event which ended the 6th age and ushered in the 7th, the One himself entering into Arda. One need not share the same religion as Tolkien to understand that his particular perspective of the primary world unquestionably informed the shaping of his secondary world in this regard. Having the dates of the 7th age coterminous with the Anno Domini dating system is a dead giveaway, but even more telling is what's written in The Debate of Finrod and Andrith, which Tolkien intended as the final appendix to what later became the Silmarillion. In it, the high elf Finrod Felagund, yes, that's Galadriel's brother, and the human wise woman Andrith debate the nature of mortality. Towards the end, Andrith reveals to Finrod the prophecy of the Old Hope. They say that the One will himself enter into Arda and heal men and all the marring from the beginning of the earth. This, they also say, or they feign, is a rumour that has come down through years uncounted, even from the days of our undoing. Finrod saw that such would necessitate that the divine nature be something akin to the Christian conception of the Trinity, for as it seems to me, he said, even if he in himself were to enter in, he must also remain as he is, the author without. Tolkien then explained in the endnotes, since Finrod had already guessed that the redemptive function was originally specially assigned to men, he probably proceeded to the expectation that the coming of Eru, if it took place, would be specially and primarily concerned with men. That is, to an imaginative guess or vision that Eru would come in incarnate human form. And to dispel any conjecture that this prophecy would find its fulfilment only in a purely fictional parallel of the historical incarnation, Christopher Tolkien commented, "But this surely is not parody, nor even parallel, but the extension, if only represented as vision, hope, or prophecy, of the theology of Arda into specifically, and of course centrally, Christian belief." Again, regardless of any reader's religious opinions regarding the real world, it is clear that Tolkien's authorial intent for his secondary world was for the incarnation of Christ in human theology, God becoming a human and living among us for a time, to be understood as the entering of Eru Ilúvatar, the one true God of his legendarium, into Arda. Jesus was Eru Ilúvatar as a human, walking among us. At which point, we should probably pause again for a moment and remind ourselves that yes, this is the same Tolkien who disliked allegory in all its forms. This is surely why you have to dig into the weeds of Tolkien's wider writings to tease out this overtly theological bit of world building. This is not Narnia with its straightforward Christian allegories. The stories we read are not Christian allegories, they are intended for everyone. But Tolkien's faith was so deep that at its heart it echoed his view of our own world, and when the two worlds met, they fitted Christian theology. But besides theology, why is all this important? Why did Tolkien so clearly want his legendarium to be not just abstract stories in a world like ours, but our own world in a different age? I think the answer lies with something Sam Gamgee says upon the stairs of Cirith Ungol as the hobbits are about to finally enter Mordor. The greatest dangers and darkest moments were at hand. He recalled the story of the Silmarils back in the First Age, and Beron's dark path in recovering one, and how he passed it to his heir Eärendil, and how it was the light from Eärendil's star, the same Silmaril, that reflected in Galadriel's mirror. He suddenly exclaims, "And why, sir, I've never thought of that before. You've got some of the light of it in that star glass that the lady gave you. Why, to think of it, we're in the same tale still. It's going on. Don't the great tales ever end?" That light can be traced back even further to the two trees of Valinor, and further forward to the evening star Venus in our own night sky. Tolkien wants us to see that these aren't just far-off stories to warm our hearts. They are a part of us. By making us be in the 7th Age of Middle-earth, not just our own 21st century, he wants us to see that we ourselves are part of the same story as Sam and Frodo before us, and Bilbo before them, and Beren and Luthien millennia before that. We too are part of the great tale that never ends. If you want more deep dives into the lore of Tolkien's Legendarium, please click on the link to the playlist that's on the left of your screen now. Or to support this channel, the best way to do that is through Patreon. The link is on the right of your screen. Thanks for watching. That's all for this time. I'll see you again soon.